I'm Marilyn Priol. Welcome to The Better Part. My guests are two community newspaper professionals. Stay tuned to hear how they do their jobs.
Welcome to The Better Part, a program that encompasses a diverse spectrum of topics important to our community, which we hope will both inform and entertain you. We invite you to sit back and enjoy the program.
My guests are professional newspaper people with the Cupertino Courier. They are Jacqueline Ramseyer, who is the senior staff photographer, and Matt Wilson, although a relative newcomer at the Courier. He's the most prolific reporter there, in my opinion. So I'm glad to have you both here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Jacqueline, I was going to ask you first, since you've been around the longest on the staff.
I have.
And the Courier is just one of a number of weekly small newspapers. I think every city in the Santa Clara Valley has their own little weekly newspaper, and aren't they all owned by the same company?
Well, the Silicon Valley Community Newspaper Group, which is the one that Matt and I work for, own 9 papers, and I work for 6 of them. And I've been working for them since 2000, so I'm one of the old timers at the papers.
Oh, and that also includes the San Jose Mercury, the daily newspaper?
We are not on staff there, but we definitely contribute to their local news.
So then you don't just do, and you've always had pictures in the Courier that I see, but you're doing pictures for all the other 6 that you work for then.
That's correct. I shoot for our 4 San Jose resident newspapers. I shoot for Sunnyvale and for Cupertino. And I also do a lot of editing at work, so when I can't be there to actually shoot the photos, occasionally Matt or some of the other writers shoots the photos and I do the editing at the office for the papers.
So do you get calls from a central person who sends you to the various places, or do you get a call from the individual newspapers to take the photos?
Well, we have a headquarters office in downtown San Jose, and that's where all of our staff is housed. And Matt and I actually sit within a pencil throw of each other. And with our editor for the Courier and the Sun, we have meetings every Monday and we discuss our upcoming stories for the week.
Okay.
And then I get assignments from the writers and I schedule my week accordingly. It's really a collaborative effort. We decide on what stories are going to run in the paper, and then we talk about how we're going to cover it, how we are going to photograph it to illustrate the story that the writer is doing. And then usually when I come back with pictures, I like to show them to the writer because they're in the process of writing their story, and I like to make sure that what I've shot is helping to illustrate what they're writing about.
That sounds like an awful lot of work.
But it's work that I love, so it's really doesn't really feel like a job.
Oh, good. Matt, I recently saw you at Memorial Park. You were covering a story, and you told me that you were in a rush because you wanted to turn it in also to the San Jose Mercury Daily News. And I was wondering if you have to write a variation of a story that would go in that paper from the ones that would go in the weekly local papers.
That's true. It really varies, though, depending on the story. Like many of our big feature cover stories, we give those the Mercury News after the fact, fully complete. But, for example, if we go to a city council meeting and they make a major budget decision, or we go to a school board meeting and they approve the decision to go forward with a parcel tax on the ballot, we will turn around a very quick story, because that's breaking news, to the Mercury News, and give them maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs. But we will give them a full story after it runs in our regular issue in about a week, with quotes and more information and background information and more context.
So you are actually, you're reporters and photographers for the big newspaper as well. They're using your material then.
Definitely, yeah. Yes. I don't know how long ago, about 3 years ago, we were purchased, and we were all under the same umbrella company.
Having been there 11 years, you get your choice of assignments that you want?
No.
You don't? Okay.
I do, you know, most of the stories we do, I'm really happy about doing. Occasionally, as Matt said, I can't be in 2-3 places at the same time. So I do have the ability to hire a freelancer. I've got a staff of freelancers. I've pre-screened them. They've signed contracts, and we will send them out. I will send them out on assignment, and that's when I turn my, put on my editing hat and start doing editing at the office.
See, now is it different, say, from 11 years ago when you go out and take pictures now and submit them? It's all electronic, isn't it?
Oh, wow.
You're not in a dark room developing anything, or?
Wow, no, 11 years ago we didn't have a dark room, but I was friends with every Wolf camera in the South Bay area. They could get my film in and out to me in 30 minutes. And I sat in the car a lot and did crossword puzzles while I was waiting for that, and I was also scanning all my photos. So it was taking up an incredibly larger amount of time than it does now. We went digital in about 2002.
What made you decide to go into newspaper photography? Did you do other photography before then, like for Olin Mills portraits or anything like that?
I moved down to San Jose to finish my degree in photography at San Jose State, and you get the ability to do all different kinds of photography, and I've always liked documentary photography. It was one of my classes that I had that I learned about the excellent photojournalism program that San Jose State has, and I did a minor in photojournalism, and I fell in love with it, and that's pretty much the end of the story. I started freelancing for the community newspapers while I was in college, and then was hired, fortunately, shortly after that, after I graduated.
Great. Now, Matt, I picked up a Courier recently, Cupertino Courier here. You had the headline story, the big front page story, and it continued on inside the paper, and you had another feature story in there that took up several pages, and you had a total of 7 articles in that newspaper. I couldn't believe it. And how do you do it?
I don't know. It's sometimes I don't know how the whole paper gets put together each week. It's nice at the end of the week, even 3 years into the job, to see the final copy and pick it up and really say, wow, I did all of this. You know? The job, I would say, is mostly time management. It's knowing when it's knowing when to do an interview, how long to make the interview, because I've had interviews where people just want to talk and talk and talk, and I'll go over to their house and visit them, and it's really just a 15-inch story, but they will talk to me for like an hour, and I need to manage my time and say I need to get back and work on my 6 other stories, plus the news briefs, plus the sheriff's report blotter, plus maybe even taking a few pictures, plus checking with my editor to get the stories ready for the following week. So it's definitely 40 hours a week. And then that's not counting.
All?
Well, it's not counting the mental time. Like, I think about stories in the shower. I think about stories before I go to bed. I think about stories on the way to cover another story. It's always on your mind. And, you know, you not necessarily have to be on the phone interviewing someone and not necessarily at the computer to be working.
And also, I guess, when you're out covering one story, you pick up others that you bring back to your meeting and propose those then.
Absolutely. We bump into stories all the time. Like, we had a cover story, our most recent cover story. Jacqueline was going to cover an event somewhere else, and she just happened to pass by this area and noticed these people gardening, and she's very good at making small talk, and next thing we knew, we had a cover story.
That's kind of the way we do it here.
By the seat of your pants.
Yeah, you know, you go to the bank and then suddenly the teller has an interesting story. So there you go, there's a 30-minute program. Well, did you start out to be a reporter, newspaper reporter?
I'm here completely by luck in meeting the right people at the right time and saying the right things at the right time. I spent forever in college, 6.5 years total. I studied economics, psychology, public relations. And I transferred to San Jose State as a magazine journalism major, and after one semester said, I am never working for a newspaper in my life. I don't like interviewing people. I don't like doing the reporting. I don't want to be social. I want to be an economist wearing like a silly bow tie, sitting in a dark room, crunching numbers. But as I was doing my public relations program as well, I got invited by a teacher to join this internship program with Silicon Valley Community Newspapers. And at the time, I was incredibly desperate for 3 units so I can get my financial aid. And I said, what the heck? It sounds like fun. And I did about 6 stories while I was there. This was about early 2008. And I really hit it off with my then editor. And he liked my writing, and I really got along with him. And the next thing I knew, there was a job opening. And he said, we need to hold a plug. You want to be that plug? And I graduated on a Friday, and my first day was on a Tuesday the following week.
Oh, my goodness. Well, you certainly filled a lot in that newspaper, I can tell you. Do you love, in the reporting, do you love most extracting the story from somebody and telling their story, or do you enjoy, because you do it so well, do you enjoy the actual writing process?
It really depends on the story. Given my PR background and the psychology background, I don't tend to look at newspapers the same way maybe a veteran reporter might. I like to find the story and tell the story. And
More
sort of
documentary.
sort of highlight what is the big picture of this story. It's not necessarily getting the scoop and turning around a quick story, but it's sort of like meeting someone and finding out why they're interesting and getting that information out of them and then sharing it with the broader community.
Do you have any tips now, since you do so many of these?
I like to frame the interview less as of an interview but more of a discussion. If I ever have to deal with a difficult source, I always make sure to tell them my editor has assigned me to write on this story, so that when they're talking to me, they're not necessarily thinking they're talking to the byline, but that they're talking to me, somebody who is being forced to write it, or someone who has an obligation to write it, not necessarily because we're nosy or because we're out to get them. So I like to make it more of a one-on-one discussion, because I have a very inquisitive mind. Like if I encounter somebody and they have a very interesting story to tell, I'm actually really listening to what they have to say. The reporting aspect is sort of in the background, and I think that really helps with extracting information and getting people to relax and to sort of be themselves rather than be in reporter-interviewer mode.
Did you ever have any funny or embarrassing things happen during the course of all this?
Yeah, you know, sometimes you say something silly. Like one of my very first interviews, I encountered a girl that was graduating with a perfect GPA, ace the SAT, and was going to Brown University. And I sort of jokingly said, oh, only Brown, you know, being super sarcastic that she was only going to Brown University. But I think she kind of took that the wrong way, and it set maybe the wrong tone for the interview. I think it's funny now, but maybe she didn't think it was so funny then. One of my more humorous experiences is we recently did a feature on international supermarkets, and I met the nicest owner of this Iranian supermarket, and he was just so enthusiastic to share his store with me. And this is another one of those interviews that takes 2 hours when it really should have only been 20 minutes, because we went down every aisle and he was sharing all these different products, and he was giving me samples right off the shelf, right out of the bags and stuff. And some of the food was very foreign to me, and there were a few times where I tasted it, and I think my face did turn green, like in the cartoons, because it was very outside of what I'm used to.
Oh, dear. Well, those things. What about you, Jacqueline? Did you ever have any exciting, how about maybe dogs chasing you when you go out to someone's home to take their picture or something?
I haven't had that happen. I love talking to pretty much everybody that I meet. I mean, everybody's got a great, interesting story. I've definitely had people who have tried to convert me in the confines of their living room to their religion. I was shooting football actually about 6 weeks before I got married back in 2002 and got nailed by the referee and got a black eye.
How did that happen?
Who then turned around and yelled at me.
Oh, because you were up there taking pictures? You
well, because he thought I was standing in the wrong place where I wasn't, and he he rammed my camera into my eye. So that was that was pretty interesting.
Wow.
I've had a few injuries on the job, but for the most part, it's just been, I mean, I've gone from being single to being married to being pregnant on the job to now I have a 6-year-old son, and I've managed to, work has just been very good to me about managing to work around my new schedule as it comes along. My son comes with me occasionally on shoots when I need to bring him, and he's really good about just sitting and doing his thing, and it's been a really great adventure. It's funny because you were talking about all the stories that Matt had in the paper the other week, and if you asked either one of us what we covered last week, we probably wouldn't remember because we are constantly working 2-3 weeks at a time.
I had to.
Yes.
You have some favorite things in here that maybe you photographed or worked on?
Well, I brought some. I don't have a photo album that I keep around. Everything that I have is digital on my computer, but you know, we do the first day of school every year, and that's always a big favorite for me because the kids are just so adorable, and I love photographing the kindergartners, and either they're really excited in their brand new clothes with their brand new, you know, Hannah Montana backpack, or they're really nervous and they're clinging to their parents. Just, you know, there's lots of fascinating people. This was a great story. This was CEOs by day and rock band members by night. So that was a lot of fun to meet these people.
Yes.
And then this was a story that I had been thinking about for about 5 years that we finally did for around Valentine's Day, which was, I had discovered over doing some other stories a long time ago that there's a lot of teachers in the Fremont Union High School District that are married to each other.
I think I saw that article.
So that was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun meeting, and it was surprising to see how many teachers were either married at the same school or married and working at 2 other schools. So,
Have you ever thought of writing the stories as well as photographing?
you know, when I graduated from college, I was thrilled that I never had to write another paper.
To understand that.
I do all the captions on my photos, and I try to be very thorough, but honestly, I have a lot of respect for my writer coworkers because I could not make a living doing writing for a living. I mean, I would be sitting there just never getting anything out.
Well, that's why I was wondering, you know, because I think when you came out to interview our group one time, you talked about maybe 15 or 20 people, and you were there probably 2 hours, and yet you put it all together, and I wondered if you had an assistant who helped you write those.
No assistance, and it's like a puzzle, especially these days with word processors. Like, I remember very clearly when I wrote the 1000th episode of The Better Part story, because I had pages and pages of notes and names. I had to match names with what they said, and I had to put it out all on the word processor. But what's cool is that you can manipulate it and move it around. It's not like in the old days where you had a typewriter and you had to do it all in one take.
You mean cut and paste?
Cut and paste, move around. It's like
real paper moving around.
But if I have a quote by Marilyn and I'm like, this belongs down here rather than up here. So each of these stories, it's a puzzle you have to put together, and it can be overwhelming, but writer's block is not an option when you're on deadline.
Well, let's see. How about some other kind of writing now? Now that you're so good at this, have you thought about writing maybe magazine articles on the side when you're not?
I have, if there was time. Usually when I come home after, especially on a Friday after getting the entire paper done, the last thing I want to do is sit at my computer and write. But I have thought extensively about what kind of future writing I could do. I've always wanted to maybe write for television. I've always wanted to get more into creative writing, storytelling. I love doing feature stories. Jacqueline mentioned the Teachers in Love story. That was a great one to write. It's very rewarding to tell a story that hasn't been told. And sometimes I'm notorious for writing too much. My editor is probably pulling out his hair right now reading one of my stories. That's far too long. But the nice thing about magazine and feature journalism is that you can write and write and write and write. and you can sort of paint a nice flowery picture, whereas most news writing, especially these stories right here on the front page, they're usually hard news. You gotta get to the point quickly, and there's not usually a lot of room for elaboration.
Is there much editing going on for, say, if you sent something to the Mercury, would they edit your story?
Oh yes, they have somehow even more, from what I've noticed at least, more constraints in terms of space. And a lot of my stories that I get sent over there might be, 30 inches long, and we'll condense it down to 10, and it can be frustrating at times because important details get left out, or somebody's name gets cut out altogether. And I know that the essential story is still there for the public at large, but I know that more could be told with more space.
I guess it depends on what else they have to fit in the paper.
Exactly.
Are they limited to a certain amount of pages?
I don't know.
They print? I mean, I've never really counted them, but would, say, the Courier have the same number of pages every week?
No, not at all.
Just whatever is required to tell them.
Yeah, unfortunately, our papers have been getting smaller. I'm sure readers have noticed. So we don't find out how big our paper is going to be until Friday afternoon. And so either stories that can be held get held, or stories get cut shorter. We don't run as many photos. We have a website that's part of the Mercury News that we have stories and photos posted to, but we also started posting the full story and way more photos on our Facebook pages. So people can go there and actually get a bigger picture of the story sometimes.
I hope they never discontinue these little newspapers.
Me either.
I always watch, the BBC World News from Britain, and all the CNN and all those, but I love the little local newspapers that talk about where I live.
Well, these papers are incredibly important. I mean, we cover the news that nobody else covers. Sometimes the big papers only come out to Cupertino or Sunnyvale when Steve Jobs is in town, or if something's gone horribly wrong, or if there's just, if it bleeds, it leads kind of story. I'll never forget February a couple of years ago, I was in a school board meeting, and they were about to put a parcel tax on the ballot, and I was one of only 10 people in the room. 8 of them were parents. The other person was, I think, a school teacher, and then there was myself, and I thought, nobody's going to know about this. Nobody's going to know that the district wants $125 per property owner per year unless we cover it. So it was kind of a eye-opening experience.
Well, I'm wondering a little bit now, I don't know if it's appropriate to ask this, but is a reporter paid by the line or the story, or is there a salary? And the same way with the photographer, do you get paid per photo, or how does this work?
We're paid by salary.
Oh. So you can just work like a dog then, and you get the same amount of money.
That is no longer an option.
No, we have a very amazing editorial staff. I mean, I wouldn't have been there so long if it wasn't. It's like family. And our executive editor has been really supportive for us, and keeps really, helps keep us as a very good cohesive unit. So when we have to work more than our 40 hours a week, we definitely get the time off to compensate for it.
Oh, but the salary stays the same.
The salary does stay the same, and we've unfortunately have had to take furlough weeks in the last couple years to
because advertising is down. Is
oh,
that
definitely, yes. Advertising's down for sure.
And have printing costs gone up then?
I believe they have, which is why our papers have gotten smaller.
I'm not too privy to that knowledge, but I would assume that everything is more expensive now.
How is it done? Like, they don't use printing presses anymore?
They do.
Do they?
Yeah,
they
it's
still,
all
but
done
how
on
do they do it with
computer.
Computer.
It's all done on computer. We have an amazing production staff downstairs, and it's not that big. I think it's about 4 people now. Yeah. We've really downsized in the last couple years, unfortunately. Which has been really hard because, like I said, we really are like family, so to have people leave has been difficult. But they do everything on computers, and then it gets sent to the Merc, they have printing presses, and they print out our papers. So our Los Gatos and Saratoga papers come out every Tuesday, and then our other 7 papers come out on Fridays.
the local offices like the Courier and the Los Gatos Times and so forth, are they just like a little cubbyhole somewhere where there's one staff member there that's taking the calls that
Oh yeah.
where the public would call in? Then
I have a little joke at the office that Aaliyah, who writes for Sunnyvale, she's our Sunnyvale bureau, 10 feet down the room.
Okay.
You know, we have one person covering the city for the most part, and their paper is essentially that cubicle.
And they're not in Sunnyvale then?
Correct. We're all in the same place.
So the Courier, it's not in Cupertino. It's in this office building then?
Yes. When we used to have a Cupertino office, we used to have a Willow Glen Campbell office, and up until last March we had a office in Los Gatos for Los Gatos, Saratoga, and Campbell. But we are now all in the same building on the Alameda in downtown San Jose. And it used to be really packed. Now there's a lot more elbow room. But there's been talk about possibly moving us to the Mercury's building off of Brokaw. But I think they've just re-signed a lease, so I think we're good to stay put for at least another 2 or 3 years.
Well, it's more convenient, isn't it, for most of you?
It is. And you know, it was nice to have our office in the community because you could be right there when something happened.
It's also nice to have like our own little, it's like our own little clubhouse there.
True.
We have our own community, we have our own little vibe, and I think we really like being close together, just us.
When you submit a story, say a dual story, and you're sending one to the Mercury as well, do they make their own headline caption?
It varies from story to story. If our editor, Chris, writes a really nice headline or something, they might take it. Occasionally they'll take their own headline and make one. On a funny story, I wrote a story about this young lady who got to the finals of the spelling bee competition.
I was just thinking about that.
And the Mercury News, bless their heart, misspelled spelling in the headline. And boy, did I get it in the comment thread because they thought I made the mistake. And it was one of those things where all you can do is laugh because it's a funny story that I'm telling now.
Laugh and cry.
You know, I was maybe mad for about 30 seconds, but it was pretty funny.
It's been fun having you both here. I've really enjoyed it and learned a lot, and thanks both for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.